All right. Lila Tover, good evening to all of you beautiful ladies. And I don't know if you know that, but if someone has the name Lila, that means evening, night. And so isn't that, I know somebody that was named Lila, and I never knew it for a long time. But if you remember last time, I talked on Deborah, or in the Hebrew, Devorah, and I've been taking a different lady and talking about the qualities. And remember, we talked about, oh, that's great, Dawn. Lila, her grandmother, Lila. How wonderful is that? Great. Well, when what I was going to say is, as this is kind of a busy time of the year, isn't it? And I don't know about you, but before Passover comes, it seems like all heck breaks loose. There's like a lot of things that just start happening, and it's not always things that are like, okay, I'm going to really search inside myself and see what leaven is to remove from me. Sometimes it's just a bunch of stuff and just a bunch of testing, and it just seems to be a lot before Passover. And since the show is titled Shalom in the Home, and we're trying to have as much sanity, as little stress and anxiety as possible, I wanted to address that a little bit first, ladies. And I know some of you, and as Alicia was saying, that she has to go to her husband's family that's going to be doing Easter egg hunt, or whatever. And how do we contend with all of these things? And it's because you never want to offend, or if you say something when it's at somebody's house, it's their house. And so, but I think there's very gentle ways that you can talk about that. But what I would start doing right now, if you are having a Seder, or you're preparing your house from Passover, start making a list. And then, like I said before, always have a mentor, have somebody or a friend, and say, can you help me with this? Or can you help me with the recipe to make the haroset? I put a whole bunch of dried fruit and everything, not just apples and nuts. And it's so delicious. And I've just done that the last few years. So to me, it is the most wonderful time. Spring is sprouting. I don't know if you're getting some of your perennials starting to come up, and the daffodils are coming out here in Oklahoma. Hopefully they don't freeze, that we don't have any more freeze, because Oklahoma has the craziest weather. Um, but it's just a joyful time, isn't it? I just see it as spring and gratitude and what our Messiah has done. And if any feast day, this is one that absolutely exhibits the Messiah. He was the Lamb of God. And there's so much symbolism to this. So I encourage you, take your time and start now, if you haven't already started, and you slowly outwardly clean your house for any uh, crumbs or leaven. Or I yesterday I went and I lifted the sofa cushions and went, oh my, why my, there is a lot of crumbs here and there. And so things that maybe you don't always look at, but then the most important thing is that we search the innermost crevices of our house. So I pray that you are being able to do that. And so tonight I wanted to bring a lady who is known. There's only two books in the Bible that have women's names, and that's Esther and Ruth. And so tonight we're also going to talk a little bit about Ruth and Boaz and Naomi. And remember, I always like to talk about what are the characters of these women, or gentlemen that are in the scriptures, how am I exhibiting? Because it's not what we say, it's much more our actions. So when I look at these characters, how can I relate to Ruth? Do you know there are over 1.5 million women whose name is Ruth? If it isn't a first name, it's a second name. Like my name is Miriam Ruth. And I know a lot of people have used that name, but it's a very, very popular name. What does it mean? Some of it means it has a very pleasant sight, and it also means a great friendship. So those are great. It says that when Ruth was young, she had a very pleasant appearance, very attractive. And then what happened? What happened to Ruth? She married. Who did she marry? She married a Jewish man. Wow. Thank you, Dawn. And so she married a man, and the mother-in-law was Naomi, and the husband's name was Elimelech. And Elimelech, Eli is my God, Melech is king. My God is king. And what happened? Elimelech died. And but they were living in Bethlehem, and hopefully both Naomi and her two daughter-in-laws, they were starting to learn about the one God. But then they decided, I guess Elimelech decides he's going to go to Moab because it's going to be better there. And what is Moab? It was what? A city of mostly idolatry. Well, they said no Moabite can enter into the synagogue. Well, I've heard a lot of commentaries on that, and it says a man, not a Moabitess, couldn't. And so rabbis kind of work around that about being married to a Moabite. And so, but look what happened. So Elimelech takes his wife Naomi and his sons and their wives, and oh my, the two sons, they said they might have been twins. One's name, who was married to Naomi, was named Sickly. How would you like to Mahlon, what meant sickly? How would you like to name your child Sickly? And the other one was very similar to that, and that they both died. And Elimelech died also. And here they are. Here's Naomi, and then her two daughter-in-laws. And so we all know, and I think it's in Ruth 1:16-17, and because she is urging Naomi, who was very beautiful at a very young age, whenever, has now gotten very, very bitter. And she says, go back to where you were from. But as, yes, Crystal has it down there, Ruth 16:17. And Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. And what is it saying? I'm going to adopt the ways of the one true God. At that time, Judaism, right? And your God, my God. And where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me. She was so loyal. She was so loyal, Ruth, to Naomi. And this is the beginning of starting to turn Naomi from bitter into more kindness and gratitude. I want you to look at that character and see, have you had a time in your life when you've been very bitter or depressed or angry or upset, And then someone comes along and does such chesed, an act of kindness, or just says, out of the blue, I'm going to take you today for lunch, or they just come over and they would bring you flowers or a gift, or just call you or write a note. And that can turn your bitterness, it can turn it into kindness and gratitude. Gratitude is so, so important. So Ruth had an affectionate disposition. Do we have an affectionate disposition? How do we act and respond? Like we said over and over, it is not what we say to our family, to our children, to others. It is how we act. The behavior shows what we believe. So, as I said, Mahlon meant sickly, and oh my gosh, he dies. They're left alone. They have no husbands. They had no children. But what? Orpha decides what? I'm going to leave and I'm going to go back to my people. So there's many commentaries saying that during the time that Elimelech and his two sons, they and Naomi, they maybe had been teaching their wives about the one true God. We don't know. It isn't mentioned there. They had to have it somewhat. They were living in Bethlehem. But what happens? Ruth decides, as we read, she's going to go right with Naomi, and Orpha's going to go back. And she says, go get husbands. And so Ruth said, I'm going to go with you. And so many people say that in commentaries, she's so blessed because how she acted, how she responded. So there's such a thing, ladies. I don't know if you've heard about the Levirate law that when the husband dies, then the nearest relative, a lot of times a brother, will then take upon to have relations with the widow to produce a child. And so what happens is that they go out and they are in telling Ruth, go into the fields. And here there's a very, very wealthy man named Boaz. He was much, much older, but he says, you come and glean. You know how we say to leave the fields, the four corners, the fields for those that do not have. And so she was able then to bring home food for her and Naomi and begin a different whole attitude in her appearance and ways. But Boaz was very attracted to her. He was attracted to her kindness, the way she treated Naomi. And so then it even says to the point that he says, don't glean in any other field. You stay with me. Well, what were some of the characteristics of Boaz? He showed extreme kindness. He showed extreme generosity, charitable. He was willing to take on and eventually marry someone and produce a child. And that child is in the lineage of King David, who is in the lineage of our Messiah. So here we have somebody, a Gentile, a woman, a Moabite. And what happens? She eventually marries Boaz and becomes part of the Israel of God. And so here we take from the two houses and turn into one that God is opening it up to all who believe in the one true God and wants to follow his ways. And how beautiful is that? So let's really just ponder a little bit. Can we even imagine some of these things that happened back then? How you're going to you lose your husband and you're young and somebody's going to take the Levirate vow and then you produce a child. It was so, so different then, wasn't it? But this was something that was acceptable. And there's even a movie that sometimes you can rent about Ruth, and it goes over all this, and it's absolutely so beautiful. And the book of Ruth is read at Shavuot because it's bringing in both the Jew and the non-Jew and all the different languages. And how lovely is that? And so I just thought today for tonight, and I've been studying about Ruth, this would be a good person to look at also. A lot of times there's always joking, but there's a lot of times that people don't have a good relationship with their mother-in-law. And this is not the case here at all. And so Naomi's life totally turned around also. Isn't that unbelievable? So Shavuot is another word for Pentecost, Dawn. It's 50 days. Penta is 50. So 50 days after the beginning of the Passover, then we begin the next day the counting of the Omer, and that's something we can go into next time. But Shavuot is the Hebrew for Pentecost. And usually in all congregations that are of the Hebraic perspective, they will read the book of Ruth, just like the book of Esther was read at Purim, if you celebrated that, or if you have a congregation. And, isn't it wonderful, ladies? Oh, wow. Isn't it absolutely wonderful? We have all these feast days, all these times, and sometimes people say, well, you might not do the two biggest holidays, they would say Christmas and Easter, and you're going to give all that up. Every week we have Shabbat. It is a Thanksgiving dinner every single Friday night. And then we have all these feast days, and what do all the feast days? They all focus on the Messiah. And what is more beautiful, if you look at a lot of things at the springtime and even at the other two holidays, it is just amazing that so much is focused on mostly a lot of candy. And so we want to get it back to thinking about, wow, what is this biblically meaning? What is the biblical meaning? And is the book of Ruth in the Bible? Yes, it is. And what is the meaning of it? And what is the meaning of Passover? What is the meaning when you do all the different holy days? They all point to the Messiah. So you have all these times of the year to look forward to doing all these special days, and they all have such significance. And so I pray that as you begin this springtime, sometimes in the Jewish community, they rid their whole house of anything that they would think have any trace of any kind of leaven. So for Passover, they might be getting mayonnaise, they might be getting mustard, ketchup, all these things, and they'll say kosher for Passover, which they completely go through their whole house. And to such an extent that by the time they're going to sit down at a Passover dinner, plus all the cooking, I'm exhausted. And with the exhaustion, what is usually, because I know for me, with exhaustion comes crabbiness and irritability. And so make sure that you take this slow. But you also, if you have children, get your children involved. Have them make a Seder plate, like draw. Have them start doing all the different plagues and things you can purchase and all that, and explaining. Have them do placemats. Have them do um, just little cards to say Happy Passover. Um, they can do that for every week for Shabbat and make it a glorious time, a time where they're not missing out by not eating all the candy or something that you go to at somebody's house. And so I know in our congregation, we make bags for the kids when they sit at the Passover, and we have everything for them from every plague and whatever. Because what is it? It says to teach your children. And what is it? What it to teach them? That we are in freedom, that we got delivered. Each one of us have been delivered, and then what the Messiah has done for us, because he was the Lamb of God that was slain. And exactly when the lambs were slain, that was when he was slain. And it is so amazing. There's so much to it. So I pray for you to have that shalom in the home. Is don't get yourself all, and there's a Yiddish word saying vermished, all in a tizzy, or you would be so frustrated that you weren't good by the time that the holiday came, or you would get sick because you were so full of stress and anxiety. And so I pray, ladies, that this helps you, and that go back and read the book of Ruth yourself and look at all these things. It's sad that she lay at the feet of Boaz and he covered her with his tallit. It's very, very beautiful. People can say all different things about it, but here this man took care of her. And then who also was blessed was Naomi. She was blessed. And Ruth came from a completely different culture. Many of us, or many of you, have come from completely different cultures, and then we've been adopted in. And isn't that wonderful? That's all of us. And so we learn each time, and each year we grow. And so, like I said, you have the Rooted Cafe. You can ask any question. Hopefully, you have other people or friends. You can always text me. You can always ask me anything, and I would be happy to help you. I've gone through this for many, many years, and I also make a lot of the foods, but I've learned that the most important thing is the spiritual food. So I think we've gone about 30 minutes, and how about Crystal, you coming back in and see if the ladies would like to discuss anything? And so